You.
That was Fly Me to the Moon, Frank Sinatra, backed by Count Basie. You're listening to Counterpoint, where our guest is Mark Steyn, and we're discussing his alarming new book, After America. Mark, do you think it's significant that no American has actually been to the moon since 1972?
Yes, I do. I mean, I think again we're a bit complacent about how supposedly fast-moving our world is. And I was at a college graduation in Vermont a few weeks ago, and the big shot speaker who'd flown in from New York told these 21-year-olds, "You are living in such a fast-moving world." I thought this was ridiculous. In the book, I use the example of an H.G. Wells type time traveler. If you put him on the old time travel machine in 1890 and propelled him forward to 1950, he would be astonished. He would be in his 1890 kitchen 60 years later. Everything would be different. He'd be amazed by the refrigerator. He'd be amazed by the full sound of an orchestra coming from a little box on the countertop. He'd be amazed by the station wagon pulling into the drive. Man conquered night with the electric light bulb, conquered distance with the invention of the internal combustion engine. He would be amazed by the telephone. He would be amazed that you could book an aeroplane flight to Los Angeles or to London or to Sydney. Now, we propel him on another 60 years to our time, from 1950 to our time, and actually the kitchen looks pretty much the same. You know, the fridge is a little less bulkier, and it may have an ice water thing in it, but there's really no difference. The phone has got buttons instead of a dial. Again, basically not really different. It takes long-distance travel, takes actually longer in many ways than it did back in the 1950s. And we're supposed to be impressed because Steve Jobs at Apple has invented a slightly smaller gizmo on which you can download Lady Gaga or Justin Bieber. I don't think that's enough. I mean, and people do. People just say, "Well, it's fantastic." You know, have you seen the new iBox 7? It used to be an inch and a quarter for downloading Justin Bieber on, but now it's an inch and an eighth. Big deal. I don't think that's enough.
Mark, people have been saying about America it can't go on for a long time now with the big government, the growth in debt. But obviously it has gone on. When do you see it stopping, and what's going to happen then?
Well, I think, for example, if the IMF is correct, China will become the dominant economic power on the planet in the year 2016. Now, the IMF might be wrong. They're wrong about a lot of things. But if they're right, that means that the President of the United States elected next November will be the last President of the United States to preside over the world's dominant economy. I think that is a very profound shift. The Chinese certainly see it as that. They see it as the end, in effect, of not just 2 centuries of Anglo-American global dominance, but of a kind of broader half-millennium period of European dominance. But even if you don't see it quite in those terms, by the middle of this decade, just the interest payments on the federal debt to China will be covering the entire cost of the Chinese People's Liberation Army. There are not a lot of precedents for that in history. And I think people are complacent. People keep thinking it's about 2050 or 2070 or 2080. It's not. It's happening a lot faster. And Australians, I think, perhaps see this more clearly than people in America do. After the Second World War, there was a transfer of power, essentially a forced transfer of global dominance from Britain to the United States. For Britain's situation, it's like you're an old failing family firm and you look for the best buyer out there who can protect your brand. That's basically putting the best face on what the British were forced to do after the Second World War. And as you know down under, as the Canadians know, as they know in Bermuda, America, for the most part, simply inherited the global networks built by the Pax Britannica, so that the U.S. built a naval base in Bermuda. Royal Canadian Air Force officers were stationed at NORAD in Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado. There was the ANZUS alliance between Washington and Australia and New Zealand. And from the point of view Britannia's lion cubs. It was very much understood that the priority now is not to be able to get on the phone and get through to some guy in London, but to be able to get on the phone and get through to Washington. They understood, I think in an odd way, they understood how smooth and how unusual that kind of transfer of global dominance is. And in a strange way, I don't think Washington does understand that when any similar transfer from the United States to China is not going to be like that at all.
Well, things are crook in America. Do you think Obama might be a one-term president?
I think that's entirely possible. What always impresses me is that even given the fact that whatever it is now, 70-something% of Americans think the country is on the wrong track, his numbers personally hold up, and I would expect them to hold up once a Republican nominee is identified. I don't subscribe to the view that Obama is incompetent or stupid or any of that. I think he actually has a very clear view of what he's doing, that if he can establish federal spending as 25% of GDP as the new baseline, then he fundamentally transforms the nature of American society in a way that's tremendously advantageous to those of his political disposition. And he's prepared to take electoral heat for that. And I wouldn't be surprised if in the end he is prepared to pay the price and be a one-term president, because it's better, as he sees it, I think it's better to be a transformative one-term president than simply to be keeping the seat warm for a couple of terms, which is what he thinks Bill Clinton did.
Mark, looking at your longer-term pessimism for America, a pundit named Joel Kotkin has written a book called America in 2050, The Next 100 Million, and he believes immigrants will reinvigorate the place as they have so often in the past. I mean, what do you think of that?
Well, I think you can make that case in a way more easily with somewhere like Australia, the island continent. Generally speaking, to get to Australia, you have to come from somewhere else. That's not quite the same as what's happening in America. In America, the Southwest is basically being reassimilated with Mexico. I think border immigration is different from any kind of other kind of immigration. I've got a little section in the book on that. I think border immigration, where somebody draws a line and there's there's Bosnians on one side and Serbs on the other, or there's Northern Irish Unionists on one side and Southern Irish Nationalists on the other. Border immigration is always conditional. And I think when 70% of births in the biggest hospital in Dallas are Hispanic, a category that didn't even exist in the 1960 census of the United States, and yet is now the dominant demographic in the Southwest, I think it's quite possible it could rejuvenate or re-energize America. I think there's a bigger question on whether it actually will be America or whether it will simply be a kind of northern version of Latin America. And I think that is, I think in that sense, Australia's immigration experience is entirely different from what's going on the southern border.
Well, what are your final thoughts on America? You've written a book with the byline, Get Ready for Armageddon. Do you think there is any hope for the place, or have you already booked your tickets to move from New Hampshire to New South Wales? I hasten to add that this is the hill I'm going to die on. I think it's fascinating here. There's a question mark over America. It's a 50-50 nation. It's not always clear in a 51-49 split who's going to come out on top of that, but there's something to play for here. There is in Australia too. I don't think there really is in Greece. I'm not persuaded there really is in Britain anymore either. Basically, when the dependency class and the government class get big enough to crush the productive class in the middle, you're in huge trouble. Here, I think there are enough people who still get the crisis we're facing and are prepared to push back against it. I wouldn't want to predict the ending, and if there is a happy ending, it's going to need tens of millions of American citizens to get in there and make it happen. But I think there's still something to play for here. Live free or die, as they say in New Hampshire. Mark, thanks very much for joining us. Always a pleasure, Michael. Conservative commentator Mark Steyn, and we'll put a link to his website, Steyn Online, on our own Counterpoint website.